The story tells about a mysterious dream that always appears in Shiloh's dream. Shiloh is a young boy who always listens to his dream that leads him to a mysterious place. The dream tells him about mission, whom he need to fulfill. However, its explanation is not easy to get. It is even very strange to him. Everything begins to change since he meets Jumi. Jumi is a part of race who hunts the jewels. Their meeting becomes the beginning of his journey. His dreams and missions are getting clearer. Shiloh must help Jumi and their gemstones. This will lead him to his destination. However, their journey is not easy and must get through dreadful obstacles. The anime opens by showing a young boy who has a great sense of justice named Shiloh falling from height. He screams out loud after realizing that he is going to fall. He wonders where he is and calls out for help. Suddenly, he is rescued by a goddess called Ai. Turns out she is the one who had summoned Shiloh to that place. She gives him missions to see the world and help others to make choice. He hasn't understood what she means. She said she will give him all he needs to help him accomplishing the task. She asks him to seek and find her. Shiloh wakes up and it turns out that he has had the dream again. He gets out of his bed and opens the shades from his window. After that, he greets a plant called Lil Cactus. After dressing himself, he heads downstairs. There are two children waiting for him. The boy is called Bud and the girls is called Corona. They greet Shiloh as master, which he objects that. Moreover, he never think of them as his student. However, they still consider Shiloh as their master. They ask him to teach them magic. Annoyed that the two call him that, Shiloh ignores them by checking the fireplace. Feeling as if they are imposing on him, Bud and Corona decide to leave his house. As they are about to open the door, Shiloh stops them, saying that there is nothing he can teach them as a master. Furthermore, he claims that he is not good at magic. However, Shiloh allows them to stay at his place if they don't have anywhere else to live. Shiloh explains his house was built by Domina's people to celebrate his coming of age. Thus, he never thinks of this house as his own. Besides, their parents had passed away, so they must think what they need to do. Then, Shiloh asks them to stay at his place. However, Bud and Corona don't feel like to stay at the place the town folks had built because they caused problems at the town the other day. Even so, Shiloh convinces them that the people will forgive them. They all then leave the house. On the way, they meet a talking tree called Trent. Shiloh introduces Trent to the kids. Trent informs them that some fruits have grown up on his roots and asks Shiloh to harvest them. Pleased by this, they proceed to harvest them and take them in the baskets. Later, they will give some of them to the people of Domina. Afterwards, they head to the ranch. There are many cute and unique animals and monsters. Bud and Corona feed the mushroom monster. After asking Corona and Bud feeding the animals and monsters, Shiloh heads to the town by himself. Arriving at the town, he accidentally meets a pumpkin-headed boy called Duel. Duel tells him about a man named Rory who ignored him. When they heard a commotion in the place Rory just got in, they decide to get into the house. Inside, Rory is yelling at a winged girl named Rachel. Shiloh and Duel try to stop him. Annoyed that they have intervened him, he takes out his sword and engages Shiloh in a fight. Shiloh also takes out his sword. Seeing both of them are jing to fight, Duel joins them and takes down Rory. Duel and Shiloh ask what he is looking for in that place, where he answers that he is looking for Princess Shinju. He saw a glint in Rachel's house and thinks she might be there. Rachel, on the other hand, doesn't know where she is. Rory kept asking her where the princess is and so he was yelling at her. Cannot find Princess Shinju, Rory leaves the house in frustration. After that, Shiloh visits Nouvelle at the church to deliver his basket of apples and asks Nouvelle to distribute these to all people at the town. As Shiloh leaves the church, he meets Rory but he ignores him. Rory confronts Shiloh and requests that he help him find Princess Shinju. Rory apologizes for his rude action. At Rachel's house, Rory apologizes to the fairy ladies for his action. At first, Rachel is silent, but then, because she cannot help much, Rachel gives him an artifact to help them find Princess Shinju. It will show them the person's location. Looking at his sincerity, Shiloh agrees to help him at the end. After find out the princess's whereabouts, Duel takes them to the Mic of Caverns. Reaching the place, Rory rushes inside the caverns, and Shiloh follows in pursuit. Shiloh is looking at Rory inside the caverns, but he is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Shiloh sees a silhouette of what he suspects was Princess Shinju and chases after her. It turns out she really is Princess Shinju they are looking for. She is wandering in the cavern by herself. She gets frightened by the sound of the water splash. Moreover, she has no idea what she is doing in such place by herself. She runs into some skeletons. She tries to run away but changes her mind as the skeletons has surrounded her. Before one of the skeletons can attack her, Shiloh appears to block the attack with his sword. He defeats the skeleton with a single spin slash. Shiloh addresses him Big Brother, and they get to know each other. Shiloh knows she is the person Rory is looking for. She wonders how he could know her. Shiloh explains he knows from Rory. Afterwards, they walk around the cave to look for Rory. Unable to find him, they decide to take a rest for a while, but Shiloh loses Princess Shinju somehow. Elsewhere, Rory is busy fighting the monsters that attack him. Finally, Shiloh regroups with Rory, and they rush to find Shinju. Meanwhile, Shinju comes face to face with a huge monster. She tries to talk to the monster, but it becomes agitated and causing its surrounding to quake. Rory and Shiloh heard the princess screaming and rush to her location. They team up to attack the monster. It is too strong that gives them a hard time, so the two sum up with a plan to knock it out. However, they don't realize that the monster has grabbed a hold of the princess. It has a powerful grip on her until he passed out. In state of agitation, Rory tries to attack the monster, but gets knocked out instead. As the princess falls to the ground, Shiloh catches her. He put her beside Rory, who is also passed out. After that, he launches multiple attacks against the monster. Even though he has tried his best to attack the monster, he still cannot defeat it, and the monster knocks him to the ground. Before it could finish Shiloh off, it gets eliminated by a great beam of light. Finally, the three of them awaken. They are clueless who had rescued them from the monster, whereas their savior is another figure of Princess Shinju called Lady Pearl. After that incident, Rory explains to Shiloh that Shinju and he are Jumi that were born from the Jewel Core. Rory and Shinju go on their journey to find other Jumi, but they have not found them yet. After that, Shiloh parts ways with Rory and Princess Shinju, as Shiloh will go back to Domina. Before leaving, Shinju gives him the artifact as a thank you rewards. There might be a chance in the future Shiloh will use it, and the three part ways to live their life. On the other hand, Duel and others are waiting for Shiloh's return. While they wait, they talk about Rory. Looking from his features, Duel wonders if Rory is a Jumi. Then they talk about Jumi race, and they become engrossed in conversation until they don't realize that Shiloh has just arrived. And when they see him, they welcome him happily. Rachel and others ask him about the person whom Rory was looking for. Shiloh tells them about Shinju and what happened in Mekiv Caverns. Knowing that they are Jumi, Rachel's father warns him not to get involved with them because it can make him petrified or get hit by a storm. In an instant, Shiloh becomes sad. Finally, Shiloh arrives at his house. There are Bud and Corona sleeping on the dining table. After changing into his pajama, Shiloh sits on his bed with the artifact in his hand. Shiloh contemplates about the Jumi race. He looks outside the window and spots Nikita and Inspector Boyd. Shiloh rushes to meet them. Outside, Inspector Boyd and Nikita are talking about something. Shiloh approaches the two and talks to them. Shiloh charges Nikita for the incident in the past. Back then, Nikita forced him to give green ball buns to him. Unable to pay him, Nikita rushes off in a haste. After that, Shiloh asks Inspector Boyd his purpose for coming to the town. He reveals that he wants to prevent the jewel hunter named Sandra from carrying out the action to hunt Jumi. He has been following Sandra for a couple of times, but he hasn't seen her. Upon hearing this, Shiloh asks to accompany him. Suddenly, the artifact in his hand starts to glow, giving information about the location. Shiloh and Inspector Boyd decide to leave immediately. Inspector Boyd allows Shiloh to accompany him and has him prepare for their journey before their departure in the morning. After that, they part ways to go back to their house. The next morning, a fully prepared Shiloh comes to Inspector Boyd's inn, and they head to Gato City. Before leaving, Inspector Boyd warns Shiloh that their journey will be extremely hard. Even so, Shiloh determines to go because he hopes to meet Rory and Shinju, and the journey to Gato City begins. Arriving there, Shiloh and Inspector Boyd enter the temple. A nun approaches then, hands over the letter from the Sandra. Boyd asks about the Flame of Healing. The nun informs him about the tale from hundreds years ago. When the wars broke out, many soldiers wounded. The nuns invited them to the temple and exposed them to the Flame of Healing, and their wounds were recovered in an instant. These gave hope to the soldiers, and they who had returned to their hometown presumed it the Flame of Hope. The nun asks for their help to protect the flame of healing from Sandra because it is very important for them. Inspector Boyd promises to protect it. As thanks, the nuns have prepared Blessed Elixir. Blessed Elixir is an alcohol produced in the town's caves. It goes very well with meats. After conversing for a while, Inspector Boyd asks the nun to take them to the flame of healing source. The nun gets them to the location of the flame of healing. There they meet the flame keeper, a red-haired man named Rubens. Inspector Boyd will stand guard so that Sandra cannot sneak in. Because Shiloh has different goal to find Jumi in the town, he will part way with Inspector Boyd. In the town, Shiloh walks around in the market. He spots a jewelry store and he decides to get there. At the store, Shiloh meets a merchant who is examining the gemstones. Shiloh asks him about the Jumi race, but he doesn't know about their existence in Gato. Doesn't get anything from the store. Shiloh decides to leave, but he won't give in and will keep trying to find the Jumi race. On the way, Shiloh asks the people if they ever see any Jumi in the town, but he doesn't get anything about that. Then he remembers about Blessed Elixir and intends to go to the production site. Then off he goes to the cave. There, he heard someone is laughing. Shiloh walks deeper and sees two women talking to each other. They are a girl in yellow hair named Seraphina and a little fairy. They don't know Shiloh's presence and keep talking to each other. As the fairy realized about Shiloh, she hides behind Seraphina's hair. Got caught eavesdropping, Shiloh approaches them. The fairy talks to Shiloh excitedly because according to her, Shiloh is different from other people she had met. Shiloh tells them his intention for coming to the cave is to find Blessed Elixir, but he doesn't know the place. Then Seraphina takes him to the Blessed Elixir production site. There are 3 women in veil registering the log. Without further ado, Shiloh asks them about Jumi, but no one knows about them. Shiloh explains he has a friend from Jumi race. Hearing that, Seraphina gets excited and wants to know more about Jumi. Before that, Seraphina invites Shiloh to have lunch and takes him to the steamed green ball buns merchant. It is the best snack in the town. Shiloh is surprised to see her recommend this. He is hesitant to take a bite. On the contrary, Seraphina seems enjoy her bun. At last, Shiloh tries to eat the bun and he is surprised because it tastes really good that he eats it well. After that, Shiloh keeps his promise to tell her about the Jumi. After finding out the features of Jumi, Seraphina is certain that she has met one before in a temple. He is a red-haired man with a red gemstone on his chest. It turns out that he is the flame keeper, Rubens. After listening to her explanation, Shiloh decides to meet Inspector Boyd. Shiloh rushes to the temple and asks about Reuben immediately once he gets there. The nun tells him that Reuben went to the cliff terrace. Shiloh then asks the nun to get Inspector Boyd to the cliff terrace soon, and off he goes to the cliff terrace to see Rubens. As reaching there, Shiloh asks Reuben if he is a Jumi. Shiloh also asks him to stay beside him because Sandra might be after him. Furthermore, Shiloh also asks him to meet Ruri and Princess Shinju. However, Rubens refuses him. Shiloh convinces him telling that Rory and Princess Shinju are looking for other Jumi. Rubens tells him a story about Jumi. Back then, they had built a bejeweled city and lived together. Jumi are given tasks according to their ability. Princess is the one who had healing ability, and those who had fighting ability became the knights. However, most of princesses were merely a name. There was only one princess who could shed tears and heal the wound. One day the princess was kidnapped by one of them. Then Jumi could not heal their wounds suffered from anxiety. Someone might be hiding the princess. Therefore, they couldn't trust others and began to leave the city. Even if they reunite, it will only repeat the history. Just then, a sproutling comes to them feeling pain on his tummy. He asks them to cure him. Then Sandra, who is in disguise as a nun, tries to examine the sproutling. It turns out there is popo bug parasites in his stomach. Sandra suggests taking off his leaf to get the bugs off, but the sproutling could have died of it. Hearing that, the sproutling tries to escape from there, but Sandra seizes him and insists. Shiloh asks her to let him go but gets scolded instead. Sandra then asks Rubens to take out the popo bugs from the sproutling. Rubens seems hesitant, but Sandra forces her to follow her word. She reminds him that he needs a cure to heal his lover from petrification. Reuben wonders how she would know about that. Even so, Reuben refuses it, leaving Sandra to do it by herself. Shiloh, who sensed that the sproutling is in danger, pushes Sandra and asks the sproutling to run away. Sandra then knocks Shiloh out and stabs Reuben with her dagger. She forbids Shiloh to get closer and will kill Rubens if he doesn't listen to her. Sandra asks Ruben to shed tears. She is disappointed because he refuses to cry and to save his lover. Thus, as his punishment, she rips his core straight from his chest. After completing her task, Sandra flees the scene. Because his core was taken, Rubens will not able to live, and in an instant he is disappeared. Just then, Inspector Boyd arrives and Shiloh tells him that Sandra has stolen Rubens' core. Inspector Boyd is shocked to learn that Rubens is a Jumi. He regrets for not able to save Rubens. It turns out the flame of hope Sandra meant is Ruben himself. Engulfed with anger, Shiloh asks Inspector Boyd to inform him if he gets another warning letter from Sandra, as he doesn't want any more Jumi to perish. At another place, Basketfish is watching the performance of a dancer named Revenge. Basketfish seems to enjoy her beautiful movement and he could not stop adoring her. At the moment, the waiter comes to serve his drink. Looking at his handsome, Basketfish becomes upset and he tosses a coin to him and demands him to leave. Realized that the guest doesn't like him, the waiter decides to leave him. Basketfish relishes that he is the king of the lounge because he is at the great lounge, served well, and entertained with Revans, the adorable dancer. On the other hand, Shiloh and Boyd arrive at the hotel upon receiving the warning letter about Sandra that is likely after Blue Eye. Learning from the incident at Gato, Shiloh thinks they might experience the same thing at the hotel. Sandra is possibly also after a Jumi this time. Then they decide to split up to find information about Jumi. At the backstage, Revenge is annoyed because he must entertain Basketfish. The manager tells her to hold herself because Basketfish is the only top spender at the hotel. Moreover, Revenge protests in a sudden. But it is not the first time for Revenge to take decisive action. However, the manager has always ignored her protests. She cannot stand Basketfish's glare. When she recalls his glare, her body shivers in fear. After that, Basketfish is about to going into the hotel. But as he wants to open the door, suddenly he is bounced off because at the same time, Shiloh opens the door from the other side. Basketfish is angry at Shiloh. Shiloh tries to apologize and shake hands, but gets taunted by Basketfish. He doesn't want to shake hands with commoners. Shiloh comments that Basketfish has acted rude and immoral, upsetting Basketfish. In the middle of their arguments, Inspector Boyd appears, annoyed with Basketfish's rude attitude. Unconcerned with Shiloh and Inspector Boyd, Basketfish walks into the hotel. Shiloh begins asking people at the town regarding someone with blue jewel, but no one knows about it. However, they have met a mysterious man in full armor. No one has seen his face. He probably has blue eyes. A mermaid mentions she often sees him by the harbor. Shiloh thanks them and leaves for the harbor. There, he finds Boyd is with the armored man. Shiloh approaches them. Inspector Boyd asks him whether he has information about Blue Eye. Shiloh relays the newfound information to the inspector. Hearing that, Inspector Boyd asks the man to reveal his face. In an instant, Boyd pulls his arm so that his eyes can clearly be seen. Later, they check if he has core on his chest, but they didn't find it. The man asks if there is an incident regarding the person they are looking for. The two explain that recently there is Jumi killer around the town. The man introduces himself as Toma, the Imperial Knight. His intention of coming to the harbor is to investigate the Imperial ship that was sunken 10 days ago. Toma informs that there was a ship carrying 20 members of elite Imperial soldiers. The ship used to handle many voyages and there had no issues, different from that last time that he comes to the harbor to find out the cause of the accident. Just then comes a penguin man approaching the three of them as he heard about the incident of the sunken ship. He suggests them to meet Basketfish because he knows everything that happens in the ocean. They can meet him at the hotel by the seashore. After that, Toma rushes to the hotel to meet Basketfish. Meanwhile, Shiloh and Inspector Boyd are still at the harbor clueless about someone who knows everything. The penguin man confirms that he uses a jewel inherited by his friend to find out everything in the ocean. When they hear about a blue-colored jewel, Shiloh and Inspector Boyd head to the hotel immediately. At the hotel, Toma goes on his knees asking Basketfish to help him, but Basketfish refuses to help him. Just then, Revenge asks Basketfish to help Toma. Because Revenge asks him, Basketfish finally agrees to help Toma. He takes the jewel out of his bag and rubs it gently that it starts showing the incident on that day. On board, the captain was explaining their mission when suddenly they heard a song of the Sea Witch. The captain asked his subordinates to close their ears so that they couldn't hear the song because it could endanger their lives. But suddenly the ship crashed on something that split the ship in two and sank the ship with its content into the ocean.
今回の我々の使命はこれから向かう港町武力行使もドーナ隊長あれはまさか2の魔女皆耳を下げ
Afterward, Basket Fish asks Talma to leave. Just then, Shiloh and Inspector Boyd arrive. They are surprised to find the Basket Fish is the one that they met before at the hotel. Boyd walks towards him and says that the gem is the core of a Jumi. Basket Fish says he doesn't know anything about Jumi. Boyd tries to convince him, saying that the gem may put his life in danger, and forces Basket Fish to hand it over to him. Shiloh intervenes them and starts to explain to Basket Fish that a jewel thief called Sandra is after the blue jewel in his hand. Furthermore, Sandra will definitely take every measure to get what she comes for. Thus, to protect him, Shiloh asks Basket Fish to give the jewel to him, and will be given back once they succeed seizing her. However, Basket Fish refuses to give the gem because he had promised not to give the gem to anybody. The scene moves back in the past, showing Basket Fish was walking along the seashore when he accidentally found a silver-haired man called Sapphire lying helplessly on the shore. Later, Basket Fish took him to his house and treated him. Moreover, he also allowed him to live there. One day, Sapphire asked Basket Fish to dive in the ocean to seize the treasure. At first, Basket Fish didn't believe him and reluctantly dived in the ocean. But after he got into the ocean, he was surprised to find treasures in the depth of the ocean. The next morning, they were sitting on the seashore. Sapphire said he had lost Marina, and he went to find a safe place from the pursuit of the Jumi killer. However, they didn't find any shelter, and one day he had to lose his night was slaughtered by the Jumi killer. He was afraid if he was discovered because it would put Basket Fish's life in danger. After finished telling him his story, Sapphire pulled his core out and gave it to Basket Fish. In an instant, Sapphire disappeared, leaving Basket Fish alone and his core. Back to the hotel, Revenge asks Basket Fish to give the jewel to her. He keeps refusing even if it is for revenge. Revenge insists him handing it over, only to make Shiloh intervenes them. Annoyed that Shiloh is getting in her way, Revenge tosses him aside. She reveals that she is actually the person who is after Jumi. She kicks aside Basket Fish. She picks up the gem from the floor and flees the scene. Inspector Boyd chases after her to the top. On the other hand, Shiloh tries to save Basket Fish. He then promises him to retrieve the gem and joins the pursuit. Shiloh runs past Serafina, but he doesn't aware of that. Finally, they manage to corner Sandra at a high area. However, Shiloh and Inspector Boyd are not her match. They are overwhelmed by her multiple attacks. As Shiloh tries to launch a counterattack, he gets his sword broken and gets beaten by her. Before Sandra can land the finishing blow, Serafina appears and saves him. Seeing her, Sandra decides to flee. Inspector Boyd feels guilty for not able to help Shiloh. Before he reports the incident to the hotel, he asks Serafina to take Shiloh back to Domina because he can get him involved in this matter any further. At Domina, Serafina manages to get Shiloh to his house. Serafina treats his wound and takes care of him. Bud and Corona are worried looking at Shiloh in such condition. The next morning, Serafina wakes the kids up to bid farewell because Shiloh is getting better. After saying goodbye, she leaves the house. Meanwhile, Shiloh finally wakes up and wonders how he can be at his house. Shiloh remembers about the incident when he fought Sandra and the danger that threatens Ruri and Princess Shinju. Bud and Corona are excited seeing he has recovered. They tell him that he has been unconscious for 3 days. Furthermore, they say Serafina carried him to the house and treated him until he got better. She also cooked them tasty food. After talking to the kids, Shiloh goes out and checks his mailbox. He finds a letter from Inspector Boyd, who apologized for involving him in the Jumi investigation. Inspector Boyd forbade Shiloh from continuing his investigation about the jewel theft and promised him that he will handle the case and Sandra alone. He said he'll be going on a faraway trip someplace and will probably not going back for a meantime. He ended his letter hoping to one day see him again. After reading the letter, Shiloh feels relieved because he knows that Boyd is safe. He then decides to look for Ruri and Shinju to warn them that their lives are in danger. Before leaving for his journey, Shiloh intends to change his weapon. Rachel's father suggests him to go to Watts to get his sword fixed. Therefore, Shiloh heads to Watts and meets Pakil. They greet and talk to each other. Shiloh hands his sword to him. He claims he can fix it even though it has broken badly. Because he runs out of the material, he must postpone fixing the sword. However, they must go to the Tower of Layers to obtain mithril. The fastest way is taking it from Iron Centaur, who has the material. But there are tough enemies and monsters that inhabit the tower. Since Shiloh needs a powerful sword, he decides to leave for the Tower of Layers and vows to retrieve the mithril. At the Tower of Layers, Shiloh sees Princess Shinju. He calls out and runs towards her. She gets calm when she sees Shiloh. Apparently, Princess Shinju has separated from Rory. She is clueless how she ends up in that place. She believes that there is a voice calling out her name just like last time. They decide to enter the tower. Looking inside the tower gives them eerie feeling. Shiloh says they need to look for Rory first when he realizes that he has lost Princess Shinju. He starts looking for the princess and finally he can find her. When they continue to walk inside, suddenly several weapons appear and attack them. Shiloh takes out his sword and defeats them. Afterwards, they get into a room where suddenly it is locked and the room starts to ascend. There, a narrow pathway leading to a big purple door. There is an iron centaur on both sides of the door. He begins to attack Shiloh. Shiloh faces off against the iron centaur. In an instant, his sword emits its light and defeats the iron centaur. After his loss, there appears Mithril in front of him. Just then, a figure named Lady Pearl appears asking Shinju to remember her duty. However, Shinju is clueless about what duty the lady meant by. Lady Pearl disappears after telling her once again to recall her duty. In the middle of their conversation, Rory calls out for Shinju. They finally reunite and Shiloh informs them about a jewel thief who is after Jumi's core. Furthermore, he says he had found out a Jumi but was slaughtered before him. He explains that the thief, Sandra, is a tough opponent that Rory and Shiloh are not her match. Thus, Shiloh looked for them to warn about this. However, Shiloh promises to help them dealing with the jewel thief. At another place, Esmeralda and Serafina arrive at the library. They get the books back on the shelves and take the magic class afterwards. They learn about the principles of magic. The teacher hands them a flute which contains Salamander, the spirit of fire. With the flute, they will try casting fire magic. They head to the courtyard to start practicing. The teacher explains the spirit will not lend them its power unless they feel the power of flame in the air and blow it into the instrument. The spirit will respond to the player's perception and share their strength. Furthermore, they need to make their desire and there will clearly understood. The teacher calls Serafina to start practicing. She is asked to burn the target with fire. Serafina begins following instruction that the teacher had explained. After imagining the fire spirit, she starts blowing the flute. Just then, the spirit of fire appears and talks to her saying that he has never seen her. The spirit of fire asks her intention of summoning him. Serafina answers that she needs a little of his strength to burn the target. In an instant, the spirit of fire burns the target. The teacher and other students are amazed by this outcome. The teacher comments he is surprised that she burns the target directly instead of using the fireball. She explains it might be dangerous if she used the fireball since other people might get hit. After Serafina accomplishes her task, the teacher appoints the next student to practice. On the other hand, Shiloh has arrived at the magic town. He asks someone about Jumi but he doesn't have any idea. At the same time, Serafina and Esmeralda are going to the inn. Serafina spots Shiloh, who is talking to the innkeeper. She calls him and they finally meet again after a while. Shiloh thanks her for saving his life last time. After that, Shiloh asks Serafina to meet his Jumi friends. Then the three of them head to meet Rory and Shinju. Rory learns that Esmeralda is a Jumi, which Esmeralda confirms it. Shinju is excited to meet someone from their kin, and so is Rory. Esmeralda apologizes to Serafina for keeping her identity secret. To her surprise, Serafina isn't angry with her. Shinju approaches Esmeralda and holds her hand. Shinju is happy because she has been looking for the fellow Jumi. She asks Esmeralda to tell everything. It has been a while since Esmeralda talked to her fellow Jumi. The last time was when she was with her sisters, but they are long gone. After that, they decide to go somewhere else to talk about it. Esmeralda explains to the group how her sister could die. She explains that the Jumi's core was sold at a high price. Other race was blinded by the greed and went further by killing the Jumi and stole their cores. One day when Bejeweled City, in which they lived, was attacked, they escaped from the hunters. When the hunters discovered their hideout, one of her sister decided to be a bait so that Esmeralda and others can escape. However, they also got caught. Looking at the condition that was getting complicated, her sisters asked her to run away while they stopped the jewel hunters. Didn't have other choice. She decided to run but her sisters had killed by the hunters. After slaughtering her sisters, they chased her. She tripped and fell off, causing the hunters manage to seize her. But before they could kill her, they suddenly disappeared after had been defeated by Nanuzak. Finally, she was safe and lived on. Nanuzak was a teacher at their school who was also the guardian of life. When she gets older, she hopes that she will find her sister's cores and find a way to revive them. Ruri suggests her to join them in their search for Jumi, but Esmeralda refuses him because she promised Nanuzak that she'd stay in Geo until she's ready or has a knight. Ruri offers to become her knight. Serafina will convince Nanuzak to allow her to search for her sister's gems, and also Shiloh and Shinju, who are willing to help her. After that, they meet with Nanuzak and introduce themselves. Shiloh and others are surprised with the teacher Nanuzak form. It turns out that he becomes in this form due to he had too much conjuration magic and got trapped in the magic circle. Esmeralda tells him her intention to find Esmeralda's sisters. Thus she asks permission to leave Geo. Nanuzak gets angry and refuses her will because she had promised not to leave until she is ready or has a knight. Ruri says HW can be her knight. Nanuzak refuses him because he has already a knight for Shinju and he only can be a knight for one person. Then Serafina and Shiloh offer to be Esmeralda's knight, which also refused by Nanuzak. Desperate, Esmeralda finally asks others to go home. Arriving at Esmeralda's room, they are talking about Nanuzak's refusal. Esmeralda tries to run away but always teleported back to Nanuzak's room. Because she fails escaping from the city, Serafina suggests an idea. Both run away and as predicted, Nanuzak gets one of them teleported to his room. However, this time he is tricked by Serafina, as he has teleported her instead of Esmeralda. It turns out Serafina has planned so that she can talk to Nanuzak. Nanuzak wants to seize Esmeralda but is stopped by Serafina. She explains that Esmeralda wants to grow up quickly, that it makes her too hasty in learning and it leads to unsatisfying output. She understands what growing up means for him is to be able to protect herself. Thus, Serafina and others promise to protect Esmeralda for her dream. Serafina convinces Nanuzak that he can protect her wherever she is. Finally, Nanuzak gives in and allows her to leave the town. Elsewhere, Shiloh and others are waiting for Serafina's arrival. They are worried about her. Suddenly, knowing that Serafina has made it and gathered with them makes everyone enjoy. Finally, Shiloh and others start their adventure to achieve Esmeralda's dream. The moment they reach the beach, Esmeralda feels of her sister as her gem starts to glow. Likewise with Ruri and D Shinju, their gems also emit the light. They finally decide to stop by the beach. There, they meet with a penguin known as Mrs. Valerie. Mrs. Valerie greets them. They see her egg and ask about that. Mrs. Valerie then tells them her story with David. After finishing her story, Mrs. Valerie asks Shiloh and friends who they are looking for. They reply that they intend to find a green gem that looks like Esmeralda's gem. Seeing that, Valerie starts to remember something and suggests them to look for the leader of miners because he is wearing a necklace with the same gem like Esmeralda's. Shiloh and friends finally arrive on the island. It turns out that there is indeed a man wearing a green gem necklace. Esmeralda asks for the jewel necklace the man is wearing. The man is willing to give the necklace on one condition. Shiloh and his friends must help him find Mr. Putty. They ask how Mr. Putty looks like so that it will be easier for them to find him. The man describes his features and explains the possibility that Mr. Putty is on the pirate ship by the island. So he asks Shiloh and others to search there while he and others search in the forest. Afterwards, Shiloh and company manage to infiltrate the pirate ship and find David keeping guard. They tell him that they are looking for Mr. Putty. After David is briefed on Esmeralda's situation, he allows them to find the person. Inside the room, Shiloh and others start looking for Mr. Putty. Then they see a dog, which judging from his features it must be Mr. Putty. After successfully finding Mr. Putty, Shiloh and others bring him back to the island. Once they arrived, the leader and others welcome them happily. As he had promised, the man gives the necklace to Esmeralda. After that, Shiloh and friends return to the beach where Valerina has given birth to a tiny baby. After talking to her for a while, Shiloh and friends decide to leave because they were going to look for 2 more of the green gem. Finally, Shiloh and company manage to collect 1 more green gem. Because Shinju's condition is weak, Esmeralda decides to take a break for a while, and they will look for another green gem afterwards. By then, they decide to go back to Geo City to replenish their supplies. The next day, because Shinju's condition has not fully recovered, Ruri tells her to stay at the hotel while Serafina is not at her room. So only Shiloh, Ruri and Esmeralda who are going to look for the green gems. According to the information from Nanuzak, it was possible that the green gems were at the gem dealer. That's why the 3 of them went to meet Christy. Arriving at Christy's place, Esmeralda asks if Christy knew about the green gem. Christy asks Sotheby about the green gem and then said that he had seen it in the basement. Christy voluntarily would give the gem if Shiloh and friends found it. The reason was that the green gem was the core of Jumi, and Christy doesn't want any dangerous things to be in her residence. Then Shiloh and his friends rush to the basement. Suddenly Esmeralda's gem is emitting its radiance, showing that her sister's gem is also in that place. And finally they found the gem. Suddenly, Esmeralda spots a statue across the room. Esmeralda recognizes it as Lady Diana. For a moment, Shiloh remembers about Rubens. It is probably Diana whom Reuben meant. Esmeralda explains Diana was the one who built Bejeweled City where Esmeralda and her family lived. Diana was the leader of the Jumi. Rory is surprised knowing the fact and wants to ask many things. But Diana says she is no longer a Jumi. Jumi was fated to perish. Diana also tells Esmeralda to give up on being a Jumi. But Esmeralda doesn't want it because she and her friends have worked hard to find her sister's gems. Furthermore, Diana says that the last princess with healing power has died, and without the tear stone there is no way to revive them. Whatever Diana says, Esmeralda still believes in her life. After that, Rory asks Diana why the Jumi couldn't shed a tear. However, before she answers him, she has one request to him to invite Lady Black Pearl to come. If he manages to get her, Diana will surely answer his questions. Afterwards, Shiloh and his friends return to the inn. On the way, Rory asks Esmeralda not to come with him concerning about Lady Black Pearl now that she has already found all of her sister's gemstones. However, Esmeralda insists on helping him because she is also a Jumi. Just then, Seraphina arrives. Seeing Sephirina coming, Esmeralda is very happy, but suddenly Sephirina pulled out Esmeralda's core until she died. Rory and Shiloh are very shocked by the scene. After killing her friend, Sephirina collects all of her gems and then immediately runs away from there. Shiloh and Rory rush to the inn but they cannot find Shinju in the room. Rory is so worried that he accused Shiloh of having conspired with Seraphina. Just then, Shiloh spots a letter on the desk. It turns out it is from Sandra saying that Shinju is in the Mekov Caverns. Rory wanted to rush away but Shiloh forbade it. He thinks it maybe is just a trap made by Sandra. However, Rory insists on going and finally the two of them head to the Mekov Cavern. Finally they arrive at the Mekov Caverns. After defeating several opponents, Shiloh and Rory manage to find Shinju and Sandra. Rory immediately draws his sword and fights Sandra but he is easily knocked down. Sandra takes this chance to provoke Shinju into crying but Shinju couldn't cry. It makes Sandra angry and wants to kill Shinju but she is intervened by Shiloh, causing the fight between the two to be inevitable. However, Shiloh was battered by her. In a critical situation when Sandra is about to pull out Rory's core, Lady Pearl is walking towards Sandra. Cornered, Sandra summons all monsters to attack Lady Pearl. Then she flees from the cave. The woman easily defeats all monsters and leaves Rory and Shiloh afterwards. Seeing Rory is hurt, the Jewel King sends Rory and Shiloh to Shiloh's house. The following day, Bud and Corona inform Shiloh that Rory is missing. Knowing this, Shiloh immediately rushes to the Tower of Lairs to look for him. Arriving there, he meets with Rory, and the two enter the tower. On the other hand, Sandra and Sephirina bring all the gems to the King of Jewel. It turns out their plan is to awaken the Tear Stone. The King of Jewel swallows all of the gems and starts casting a spell afterwards. However, he fails because he still needs more gems that the ritual cannot be performed. Because the gemstone only lasts for a few days in the Lord of Jewel's body, Sandra should quickly gather up the shortage of the gemstones. At the Tower of Lairs, Rory manages to defeat the monsters inside the tower. In that room, Princess Shinju is seen talking to Lady Pearl. Lady Pearl saying that Princess Shinju is the Jewel Princess in the Jewel Throne, and as the successor to the Princess Hadaru, Shinju must sacrifice her life for the sake of her fellow race. Princess Shinju should use her own life as a tear stone and share it with everyone. Moreover, even if her life ends, Princess Shinju will still make tear stones. However, after hearing the Lady Pearl's explanation, Princess Shinju doesn't want to die. Just then, when she sees the arrival of Rory and Shiloh, Princess Shinju swiftly runs towards them. Lady Pearl says Rory doesn't need to interfere, but Rory will not let Lady Pearl do something that Princess Shinju doesn't want. After that, because Lady Pearl doesn't want to dirty the room she asked to fight elsewhere, Lady Pearl starts fighting against Shiloh and Rory. They seem overwhelmed by her strength. Rory attacks her, but she pins him to the ground, further cracks his core, and knocks him out. Continuing the fight in Rory's place, Shiloh manages to gut punch her as Rory then regains consciousness and then stands up. Lady Pearl agrees to release Shinju and has Rory take care of her while warning Shiloh about the myth telling him not to shed tear for a Jumi as he can turn into stone. Therefore, Rory forbids Shiloh to get involved with them and leaves with Shinju. At his house, Shiloh is welcomed by Bud and Corona. It turns out Mrs. Valerie has arrived there with her son and Seraphina. Serafina talks as if she doesn't know anything about the incident at Geo, despite her goal is to find where Ruri and Shinju are so that she can steal their gemstones. However, Shiloh is not aware of that and thinks that Sandra had disguised into her and killed Esmeralda. After talking for a while, they have dinner. Seraphine starts questioning about Shinju and Ruri. Clueless with her real intention, Shiloh gives her hint about their location and probably they will be at Geo to meet the statue of Lady Diana. Shiloh tells her where the statue is and explains about Lady Pearl. Furthermore, he wants to invite her to meet them. Claims to clear misunderstanding. Serafina agrees to meet them. On the other hand, Princess Shinju and Ruri arrive at Geo. However, they don't realize that Sandra is watching them behind the wall. Hey, thank you for staying all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day and see you next time.